Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk the Walk here on Boss Rush Games. Happy Pride Month, everyone who is watching this episode. We have a special one for you because of this particular game being free on Xbox Live. We just had to cover it, and it's a great example of diversity in the game, especially for this Pride Month. Joining me though for this episode is the celestial version herself, Mr. Celeste Roberts.
Hello. It's so good to be here. Thank you, Eddie, for bringing this game into Pride Month. I think it's appropriate.
And it is the smooth and sophisticated one, Mr. Stoy from EXPCast, joining us also.
I was wondering how you were going to weave some really cool adjectives into my name, but thank you. I appreciate that, Eddie.
You are welcome. Yes,
thanks for having me here. I really appreciate being part of the conversation about this game because I'm a big fan of Don't Nods games and the messages that they bring. And Tell Me Why was definitely one that really is appropriate for this month too as well.
Yes, everybody. As you can see, we are covering Tell Me Why. There are some trigger warnings, so we are going to be talking about murder, transphobia, violence, mental health struggles, and a lot of other things that's in the game. Special note, like I said, Tell Me Why is free to claim during June 2021 in celebration of Pride Month, so you should be able to get it on PC, Windows 10, and on Xbox One and Series X. I believe
there is another trigger warning too as well, that one of us may bust out into the Tell Me Why Backstreet Boys song. It may happen. I'm not going to say who, but it may happen. So if you're not a Backstreet Boys fan and you all of a sudden hear someone singing, just let everybody know.
Tell me why ain't nothing like a heartbreak. I want it. Okay, let me stop. So yes, we are telling
you why.
Yes, we are together here to talk about Tell Me Why. Tell Me Why is an episodic narrative adventure game developed by Don't Nod Entertainment and published by Xbox Game Studios. Tell Me Why consists of 3 episodes released for Microsoft Windows and Xbox One. It follows Tyler and Allison Ronan, a pair of twins with the supernatural ability to communicate with each other through telepathy, the Bond, who reunite after 10 years in their hometown in rural Alaska to investigate the truth behind the death of their mother, Mary Ann Ronan. A recurring theme of the story is the fallacy of memory as the narrative explores the twins' childhood trauma and how they may each remember pivotal moments differently. Announced on November 14th of 2019, Tell Me Why attracted media attention during the development cycle for being the first AAA video game to create a transgender character as one of its main characters. The team consulted relevant experts such as GLAAD, a non-governmental organization founded to monitor media coverage of LGBT people, to ensure that its portrayal of LGBT characters will be regarded as authentic and respectful. Don't Not also enlisted a trans man as the voice actor for Tyler Ronan, who had transitioned during his time away from his sister. Tyler is the first transgender playable character from any major studio, and Don't Not has worked with GLAAD to make him an authentic representation of the trans experience. Don't Not has also worked with the Human Heritage Foundation to incorporate Tlingit, I believe that's it, Tlingit.
Tlingit.
Oh, Tlingit.
I think Tlingit. That's what I found when I listened to it.
Culture, Tlingit culture that is indigenous into Alaska, into the world of Tell Me Why. So, just a quick breakdown of the chapters. Chapter 1, Homecoming. It was released on August 27, 2020. Chapter 2, Family Secrets, September 3rd, 2020. Chapter 3, Inheritance, September 10, 2020. So before we get more into this, I remember seeing this at E3. I think it was 2019's E3 at Microsoft's press conference, and people were wondering what this game was about. And when they described it, I was just like, oh, wow. Like, we're getting a trans character in a game, being the lead. And so I had to literally check it out. When it went on sale, I actually waited till all 3 episodes were available. So I could just play everything straight. And wow, I am shocked on how good. And I love Tyler. I love the voice actor too, for him. It just so perfect. But Celeste, how did you find about Tell Me Why?
I think one of our friends at the podcast, Late to Gaming, had tweeted about it, and it looked beautiful. And I really love walking simulators. Obviously, we're on Talk the Walk, walking simulator podcast. So I have really fond memories. I get a little warm and fuzzy because I played this last Christmas. So Christmas 2020, I had taken off around the holidays. So I played this over the span of 3 days. And it takes place in Alaska. There's a lot of snow in the game. And the music is outstanding. Did you guys like the soundtrack?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, it was definitely fitting.
I really enjoyed it. It's very soothing. It sounds like a lot of indie music. And I love how much care they put into the designs of the houses, the police station, the grocery store. I felt like I was really visiting the town of Dallas Crossing, which is a fictional town. And so I actually started researching what's it like to live in Alaska. But I don't think I live in Louisiana. And I don't think I could handle negative 80-degree weather sometimes. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, and there are some parts of Alaska that are a little bit above the Arctic Circle, and there are times in the year where they experience 24 hours of sunlight and 24 hours of darkness, where literally for like a few days or something like that out of the year, like it'll just be constant sunlight. So you're going to bed, it's like 11 o'clock at night, but the sun is like way up in the sky, like it's nothing, like it's like kind of 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I've seen a lot of people like kind of ride through there, and I've watched a lot of those Alaskan bushcraft shows on National Geographic, because it is a very interesting part of the United States that is very scenic, very nature-esque, but live there? Probably not.
It's more expensive too. I was telling my boyfriend about my research when I was looking it up, and he said, yeah, by the way, if you order something from the continental US, it could take weeks to arrive, and they have to fly it in, and the prices of commodities, they're a little bit higher because of that.
Yeah, but at the very least, they get supplemental income. I think everybody gets a check from the government.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that's because of the oil companies in the area.
Yeah.
It's basically that inside joke where it's like, hey, we're ravishing your lush landscape. Here's a couple $1,000s a month to look the other way, kind of thing.
Thanks. Well, if any listeners live in Alaska or have lived in Alaska, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, I would too, actually. I'd be kind of curious because I know, like they can't just truck things in from the continental United States, because traveling through Canada and customs and stuff like that would just be a nightmare. So.
All right. Stoy, how did you hear about Tell Me Why?
The same thing. I heard about it at E3 because Dotnod is a Microsoft exclusive studio, I know. Because that was one of the ones that they, Xbox came and said, yeah, we just bought Dotnod, and this is going to be the first Xbox exclusive title from us, from Dotnod. So I've always been a big fan of Dotnod's games ever since Life is Strange and Life is Strange 2, and even some of the other ones. There was another like kind of Broken Mirror type game that they published or produced like last year that was kind of similar in vein. It's a walking simulator, and you're trying to solve a murder as a reporter, which is interesting. But I'm gonna have to get the name of it. It's actually a really good game, a very short game, but it's very interesting the way they tie in trauma into kind of trying to navigate through life. And that's one thing I've always liked about Dotnod is how they introduce traumatic events and trying to operate as the character to go through that. And Tell Me Why was another one that I was like really excited to play, because not only did it offer a different perspective from a character, it's a trans character, but also to just kind of the mystery at the end, which we'll talk about at the end when we get there.
Yes, because
This is a spoiler-loaded podcast, everybody.
Yes, for sure.
Yes. So it is we are going to get into some spoilerific things, but if you don't want to hear this yet, go ahead and pause it, play the game, and then come back to it, and listen to the discussion and let us know if you agree and or disagree with our decisions that we made.
I would say each episode is probably about like 2.5 hours.
Pretty short.
If you rush through every episode without like trying to maybe get all the collectibles and stuff, you could probably do it in 2 hours. But you really want to experience the whole game, so 2.5 to 3 hours per episode, I think, is pretty fair. So you can knock this out in like 8 to 10 hours.
Yes. So the gameplay, you'll be able to explore. You'll walk around houses or the environment that you are in. You'll experience flashbacks. Sometimes you'll hit the A I played on Xbox One. So like if you hit the A button, you interact. Sometimes you'll have a cutscene or something, that has a flashback to it. You'll make decisions that will alter the game's ending. There is no action or fighting, so there's like nothing where you is combo heavy or you get a gun or you got to do some kind of like fight kind of thing to survive. There's none of that in it. You really just walk up to item or you get hit with a situation where you have to make a choice. Even in the conversations while having it, they'll ask you to press some buttons and you'll press it by making that decision. And the setting to this is Delos Crossing in Alaska. It's a fictional town. And I kind of got to ask you guys, how do you feel about making choices in games? Before we actually get to the choices that we made in here, Stoy.
Well, especially in this game, you could play as two types of Tylers. You could play as two different Tylers. You could play as a Tyler that's just angry and bitter, or as a Tyler that's kind of more accepting and more, I don't want to use the word chill, but like he's kind of a little bit more open-minded and accepting. So that always kind of is interesting for me because I always play the game the way I would be. So if I were in Tyler's shoes, I would want to be the more accepting role. I don't want to be bitter. I don't want to be angry at everybody, they interact with, especially with people that I grew up with. So, making choices in games kind of gives you the freedom to interject a little bit of you and a little bit of your personality into the character that you're playing as, which I always enjoyed very much so. You got games like BioWare and Fallout, Bethesda games that kind of give you that freedom, and Don't is definitely one that does a lot of that. So I love choices in games.
What about you, Celeste?
Same here. I love making choices, and I love the dichotomy you can have with Tyler. I will say, I put myself in. I'm someone who feels bad whenever I hurt a character. I try to be a very kind protagonist as much as possible, but there were some choices where I had a hard time. The outcomes are predictable, but some of them, like one of the first choices I had to make with an object, which we will get to, I didn't know what I was doing and I made a bad choice. Well, so whenever you make a choice that is good for both of the twins, Allison and Tyler, their bond strengthens. Mm-hmm. And you see these little sparkles in the corner, they'll join together to where they're more in sync and they're closer. And if you make a decision that's a little more alienating, it's a little more negative, the little sparkles will split.
Yes.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to remember a certain event and your sister remembers something and then you remember something. If you kind of side with her memory, that kind of strengthens your bond, if I recall, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then if you're just like, no, this is how I remember it and this is how it's going to be, and then all of a sudden you start to separate. So
yes,
it's hard too to know.
No, yeah, it really is, because that's how trauma is. It's trying to remember repressed memories. And sometimes when you experience a high amount of trauma, you kind of over embellish, or you kind of remember things in a very harsher way than maybe what they really were. So those kind of dynamics that were in the game were always hard to play through. Like, well, if Tyler remembers it this way, he was the victim of this certain event. why wouldn't he remember it better than Allison would?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with this one, there is a percentage to let you know about the choices that you make. So it kind of tells you what other players in the game, what their choice was made. For me, I think when I go through a game the first time, I'll always do the good stuff. And then when I replay a game, I do the evil stuff so I can see how it is.
You're a stronger man than I am.
I
Yes, you are.
I did for Infamous. Like with Infamous, I went all completely good. And then when I replayed the game, I did straight evil. Because I think it's always good to see when you're given a choice, what does the opposite look? And we always talk about you having morals as a human being always plays a part into the choices that you make in the game. Like there's just some games that you feel like when you do the right thing, it's because that's something that you would actually choose in life. Where if you do the evil thing, it's a possibility on how your character is in real life, how people view and stuff. But sometimes you get curious, be like, you know what, I made a decision to just making my character evil, so I'm gonna do all of this bad stuff and see what comes out from it. But in this one though, ooh, good googly moogly. It was kind of like Celeste said, it was kind of hard making some certain choices because I tell you, I was just like, do I go this way? Do I go that way? And I was trying to stay like a certain way when I made the choice. But sometimes I just couldn't. And when it's your first playthrough, you kind of like not get overwhelmed, but you kind of figure like, what would I actually do to have the better outcome? You know. So we're going to get into the characters. We mentioned Tyler Ronan. He's voiced by August Aiden Black, a trans man. Tyler is a trans man and the first of the twins we see at the beginning of the game when he is a child, a young girl in the police station. Tyler undergoes interrogation regarding the death of his and Alice's mother, Mary Ann. Tyler wrote about his gender identity and feelings in his diary, which Mary Ann discovered. Tyler's first chosen name was Ali. On March 1st, 2005, Tyler had Allison cut his hair and said that he felt more like Allison's brother than sister. Tyler began looking for Mary Ann to show her his haircut, but couldn't find her. He then found her in the shred, fumbling with a shotgun and talking to herself. Mary Ann seems upset with Tyler's haircut and points the gun at him. She follows Tyler and he runs away. Tyler, who believes to be the Mad Goblin, a villain from the stories their mother wrote. When Tyler is cornered at the end of the dock, Mary Ann is either pointing a gun at him or reassuring him she would not harm him, depending on which version of the story the player chooses to follow. Allison takes a pair of scissors and stabs Mary Ann, who falls into the lake and drowns. Tyler convinces Allison to let him take the blame for Mary Ann's death. In 2012, Tyler graduated from Fireweed and began transitioning, avoiding Allison for 3 more years. Tyler resides at Firewood Residential Center, a residential center for troubled teens in Delos Crossing, Alaska. There, Tyler participates in a mentorship program and enjoys working outdoors. He aspires to be a park ranger. And like some of the things that I just said gets revealed throughout the story, but that is kind of the basic premise of it. That Tyler and Allison comes together to find out what really happened to their mother, on how she's died, and they're there to sell that house, and it contains a lot of memories. For it, and there is a particular character who has been keeping it upkeep, but we'll get into that later. But what did you guys think of Tyler? Celeste?
I really like him, and I know we're talking about the characters, but in between we're also going to kind of introduce the story and the flow of everything. Tyler, I'm very proud of Tyler because he becomes a mentor to so many of the other teens at the Fireweed Residential Center. And I've never dealt with the feelings that Tyler has dealt with since childhood. I'm a cisgender heterosexual female, and I would, because I used to watch like the Golden Girls, I would see allusions and hints of transgender people, or at the term at the time, if a man would dress as a woman, they were called a cross dresser, and vice versa. But I think Tyler's character is so believable, and I think what really helps is that they had August Aiden Black as a voice actor for Tyler, who is a trans man in real life, and August actually would help them revise the script so it would be more authentic to that experience. What about you, Stoy?
No, I think the choice for having August voice the role of Tyler Ronan kind of gives the character a little bit more believability. I don't think he would have had there would have been a stronger, impactful person to voice Tyler than someone like August Aiden Black, who, I mean, admittedly, I never knew he existed, not in a bad way, but I didn't know he was a voice actor until all of a sudden I played this game. So that's where, when you have a character like Tyler, who's transgendered and trying to find his place in the world, to have someone voicing a character that understands that, that kind of feeling of frustration and anguish and pain, kind of helps. Yeah. For example, like you said, he was very integral in maybe changing some of the dialogue choices that he made in the game, which helps writers who maybe don't understand the plight fully.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I love his voice. Just like something, his voice makes Tyler believable. It makes you really feel for him and everything. And look, Tyler's already hot. He has a charisma. I seen him
pretty attractive dude. Yes.
Yeah.
Eddie, we had the waifu and husbando episode a few weeks ago. I'm sorry we didn't invite you to that for you to talk about Tyler, but
trust me, I gave you guys a lot for EXPcast. Believe me. Which is funny. I told on the Pride panel that if you give me a list option, I would give you a list.
Yes, you definitely did, for sure.
Oh God, I need to go back and listen to that episode. I'm really excited.
I hate to admit that was our highest downloaded episode this year so far.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
people want what the people want.
Yeah, yes, we got to give what the people want. So
yes, but yeah, he is a good fit, and it kind of, when you look at the trailer, you think everything kind of revolves around him, and at some point it does, until it gets to like the third chapter, and you think that it's just one story, but it spins out to so many different stories between Allison and Tyler, which we're going to actually get into the next character, Allison Ronan. She's the second protagonist of the game and sister of Tyler. At the events of March 1st, 2005, Allison lives with family friend Eddie Brown, the police chief of the Los Krause. She works at Vini Vidi Vecchi general store with her friend Michael Albila. Allison is trying to stop smoking and she is interested in astronomy. She attended an online college for a short period of time, but discovered it was a sketchy and likely stole her credit card information. She drives to pick up Tyler from Firewood Residential Center and tosses a teddy bear out the window, deeming it as an inappropriate gift for her brother. Allison is interested in selling the childhood home, which family friend Sam Kansky has been monitoring and keeping intact. And I got to admit, I love Allison too. Like, there's something about this brother and sister chemistry that works. And I think it's because of the script and the voice acting for each of them, just the way that they're acting it out. And it might have been motion captured, I'm not sure, but there's something that's very believable between these two. And it's just like getting this outside look at a family of this caliber is something that I wish more games would touch on, or even television or movies like in this medium, that they would touch on that so we could get an idea of this world, because stuff like this is probably happening in the real world. Story, what you think of Allison?
I liked her because Eddie Brown was actually, I think that was her adopted father, right? Because after the whole
her guardian,
right, yeah, who obviously was a big factor in raising her into the woman that she is now. But I like her because she's trying to, obviously, for one, she's trying to reconnect with her brother at this time of the story, because they missed out on so much, and she wants to move on almost, whereas Tyler wants to kind of, hey, let's take a few steps back, we got to catch up. And Allison, I think, has this kind of urge or this energy she wants to go to school. She wants to go to school out of town, and she wants to, go to the big city, Seattle, for school. I think that's where she wants to do. And she wants to sell the house and leave everything behind and forget about everything, forget about the trauma that, they encountered. But Tyler's kind of coming back into the world and bringing a lot of that back. And that's where we start to see a little bit of Allison breaking down in certain instances where she's like, I'm trying to forget all this, but it's like Tyler and everything else is bringing her back into it.
Yes. Go ahead, Celeste.
Well, we don't see it because the game opens. I know we'll get into the gameplay and everything, but the game opens with young Tyler being interrogated by Eddie, actually, about the events that happened on March 1st, and then it flashes forward 10 years later, 2015. We don't see what either one goes through. That had to be so troubling, so traumatic. And they weren't in contact. Allison and Tyler, at the advice of Fireweed Residential Center, they did not engage beyond handwritten letters and emails. So I don't want to say it was like Allison was trying to move on for 10 years, but that's probably a big shock to have someone who's been gone like this, that you've been keeping at arm's length, suddenly come back. And Allison's experiencing life as a typical teenager. She's going to prom, she's going to high school, and I'm very surprised at how the ending of the story, one of the endings of the story with the house, and I don't know if I could handle it. Let me just.
I always wonder, like and I don't think they touched on it, but I just wonder. I don't think if they touched on it, they didn't touch on it majorly enough. But Allison feeling a sense of guilt because, like you said, she's doing normal high school things. She's going to prom. She's got high school friends. She's got part-time jobs. She's all this stuff, and Tyler doesn't have that. Tyler was obviously accused of the murder, and he was sent to, juvenile detention facilities and, a residential center and stuff like that. So he never had a normal life. Obviously, for one, he was transitioning, and two, he was obviously arrested for his role in the crime, so to speak. So, and in the end, covering for Allison. So that was, I can't imagine the amount of guilt that maybe she tried to suppress because of that.
Yeah, it was kind of weird because in like when you see the beginning that she's looking for the goblin, and even Tyler is looking for his goblin and stuff, and to see that they both had it kind of shows you like their connection and their how they miss each other. And Allison, like, I agree with your story, she probably did feel guilty because, like, how do you go and see your brother and check up on him, or just like, or even engage with him after all that he's done with you? You should be in that place of being in jail, not him. So and you kind of feel guilty that that decision was made and everything, which brings up to Mary and Ronan, which we'll probably have a few words about her. The twins' mother She is creative and unconventional, preferring to shelter for children by refusing to allow them to watch TV and encouraging eco living. Mary Ann used the Book of Goblins as a way to cope with her own trauma, including the death of infant Leo, her firstborn child. Mary Ann was raised by wealthy but controlling parents. Her mother interfered in her daughter's business and forced her to participate in activities and studies Mary Ann wasn't as interested in. She befriended Tessa Vici, wife of Tom Vici,
Shh, don't say that next
and
part.
took out small loans, which Tessa tracked over the years. Their friendship grew strained when Tessa suggested a conversion therapy camp for Tyler. She was good friends with Sam Kansky, who helped her with home repairs and feeding her family. It is suggested she caused Sam to leave his ex-wife. Now,
I think it's more than suggested in some of the codex entries or the diary entries that you read.
yes. So, Mary Ann, she reminds me of a real character, as a real celebrity character that I think it's not Mean Girls. It's the one with the one girl going to the college and she's the mother and all the girls are like unattractive.
Legally
House
Blonde.
Bunny?
House Bunny, yes. Yes.
Does she remind you of House
So
Bunny?
you know the girl who's the golf one, the golf looking one.
Mm-hmm.
She reminds me of her. And tell me why.
I thought you meant, I can't think of the actress's name.
Yeah.
Who plays the House Bunny.
The look wise she does. But Mary Ann was a trip. I literally thought she had some big issues, and because of her issues, she was putting them on the children, which when stuff like this happens, it affects the kids growing up. So they end up sometimes that they end up being the reason that the cycle continues, because what was done to them, they do to their children if they ever have any, and so on and so forth. And I literally thought that Mary Ann, because we don't get too much information about her or anything, but I just thought that she was making their lives miserable. And I always kind of, and once again, Celeste, you're going to get me on this. How did she ever have a house with the financial problems that she had? Like, how did she pay off for a house? You know, all the things that they was talking about that she had, because she had trouble keeping a job in this game. So I'm like, how did you got this mid wife house or whatever you want to call it looking place? I'm like, can you afford this house, especially when you don't even have stable finances coming in? So that's
they are coming from somewhere, but Celeste can go ahead with this one.
Oh, that's okay, Stoy. I'm gonna let you chime in. So, Mary Ann, I felt there's a part in the game where you really explore Mary Ann's past, and it's beautifully done. When you get to that part in the game, I highly suggest you take the time to go through all the puzzle pieces, because it's a very creative puzzle, and you learn so much more about her. She was very intelligent, but her parents were very controlling, especially her mother. Her mother wanted her to be a dancer and win awards, and Mary Ann wanted to study more artsy type things in college, whereas her mom wanted her to pursue engineering. And we even find out that Mary Ann had a pretty serious college boyfriend, and her mom convinced the boyfriend to break up with Mary Ann. First of all, okay, if your future possible mother-in-law can do that to you, maybe you weren't the right person to begin with for this.
Yeah, right.
But Mary Ann eventually runs away, and I think she does like some communal living. Is that what it suggested?
She becomes kind of like a vagabond almost, where she just kind of like traveled. Yeah, and
she and it's actually kind of late in her life. I'd say it's like her mid to late 20s that this happens to her, which is kind of interesting. So I wonder if she kind of suffered a breakdown. I wonder
probably. I imagine Marianne to have had a lot of trauma growing up, kind of feeling different. And you know how it is growing up when you're feeling different from what your parents expect you to be. And she had no solace, she had no hope, she had parents who she probably looked up to at the time basically keeping on telling her you should be doing other things. I imagine there was a lot of your disappointment like conversations, so she had nowhere to turn to. And those are the relationships that she had, is that anybody she almost trusted, she couldn't trust at a certain point because they were, she couldn't really, I don't know, feel for them or trust them, I guess, in a way.
I agree.
It kind of seemed that because she didn't have control of her life, it reflects on Tyler and Allison, because they didn't have a control of their life. They had to do what their mother said. They couldn't experience the world like they wanted to. Everything pretty much had to come from Mary Ann, and I think I agree with you. So from that trauma and everything, having trust issues,
yeah, and Mary Ann kind of created this fantasy world for her kids because she knew everything on the outside. She could barely afford a mortgage if she did have one. She was having a lot of problems with other people in Delos Crossing, Tessa, and as well, being a big family friend and just having issues with that, keeping a job. And she didn't want her kids to see this, to see their mother going through this kind of pain. So she created this world, the Book of Goblins. So she, drew them out. She wrote the stories and stuff like that. Kind of reminds me of J.K. Rowling when she first started out. I mean, she created the Harry Potter universe by herself for her kids. And the rest became history, I guess.
Well, it's surprising that, she's able to create these stories, but I'm like, how are you able to create these puzzles?
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
That's genius. And
that's pretty creative. Yeah, that whole attic scene. I'm just like, really? This is where you're gonna slow the game down right at the end?
Exactly.
I want to know, but I had to see it through. I kind of wonder. So this is a big spoiler, but she tends to run around with men who are already in committed relationships. And I'm wondering if that kind of destructive behavior is she envious? Does she want, again, it's on the man too, to engage with that kind of relationship. But I wonder if she sought out those kinds of men because, you're obviously able to commit to someone and you're a sign of stability. You're a sign of a safe harbor. You could provide for me. And it's hinted at greatly that she has schizophrenia, which I really believe she has something. She has some kind of mental illness because she's very proud. She doesn't like to accept help. Sometimes she does, but towards the end of her life, she's really struggling to accept help, and it's costing her children their quality of life. They're having to rely on food from other people, and I think like their dryer had broken a few times, and there are times where they have to rely on washing clothes maybe in that lake by their house or something. I don't know. It's very, not primitive living, but not up to par for the early 2000s. What you would expect.
Oh yeah, for sure. Not the luxuries. No, I think schizophrenia was definitely, I think, one of the more probably what she was going through, especially in the earlier part or later part of her life, where she started to kind of break down a little bit because, in the kids' eyes, they were just living life. They're having a good time. They're kind of in this bubble that I guess Mary Ann created. And I think in a lot of instances, she was very close to having her children taken away from her. And I think it was basically in the best interest from her friends of like saying, you can't raise your children this way. They, should have a normal, quote unquote, normal life where they get the things that they need to survive, to grow up to be good adults. And Mary Ann was not providing that for her. And I think that was maybe exacerbating a lot of those schizophrenic or those mental health like symptoms that she was losing control. She knew it. Everybody else around her knew it. And which kind of may have ultimately led to her demise.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna move on to the next character, Sam Kansky. Sam works in a shipyard repairing boats and is a general handyman who helps to run the family. He seems to struggle with alcoholism. Mary Ann cared for Sam when he broke his leg and encouraged him to get his ship captain's license. Sam frequently checks on the old running home, drunk and unable to recognize Tyler after the twins manage to enter the house. Sam points his gun at Tyler before Allison intervenes. Uh, Stoy, what did you think of Sam?
I kind of felt bad for Sam because he's one of those guys that has a heart of gold, but obviously the alcoholism kind of, he struggles with that, and alcoholism is a bad addiction. Working in the healthcare field, I see what it does to people both mentally and physically, and once you're in, it's so hard to get out without the help of good people. And I think maybe if Mary Ann were to be alive throughout the good portion of the story, I think Sam would have been in a better place. But I think even with the alcoholism, I think he still obviously was a good man at heart. But I know we talked about this before recording, how, when you ended your talk with, obviously Tyler is caught by Sam, and, Sam is holding a shotgun at him, and he's like, the whole, like, give me a reason to defend my home argument, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever. And he doesn't know that was Tyler. That was Allison's brother, until Allison intervenes. And then, he kind of sits down and he's like, wow, you look like a real man. And it's like, oh boy, it's one of those. But he's kind of like an old school man trying to kind of decipher what's the right way to say it. What's the right way to kind of talk about this, I guess, without sounding like, an ass. So, he's like, I didn't know they make them like that, and it's like kind of cringy because hearing that, like, geez, man, like, just shut your mouth. But, you're given the choice as Tyler to, how do you respond to this? Do you respond to say, I am a man, or I am me? And that was probably, I think, one of the more important choices in the game to make as Tyler's character, because you're trying to present yourself as a particular person. And a lot of people need to understand who you are as a character. And to say, I am me, I'm just being who I am, I think is more powerful than going around saying, well, I'm just a man. Tyler is Tyler. Doesn't matter. So, and Sam uses the word like, wow, you're one of those transvestites. And that's where another topic comes to mind, where it's like, man, Sam, dial it back a bit. Let's talk about how that word is kind of outdated and almost derogatory in a way, where it's offensive. And Allison comes in and says, hey, we don't use that word. It's appropriate to use the word transgender. And he's like, oh man, like, I'm really sorry. Like, he was a guy that means well, but he needs to be educated. And I think to a lot of these people who are uneducated, I think just a bit of education helps, in terms of, instead of like just going at him like, hey, shut your mouth, we don't use that kind of talk, get out of here. Like, Sam's the type of guy that means well, and he wants to do well. He wants to do right for people, especially that family.
Yes. Celeste, any thoughts?
I agree with Stoy. I try to picture my own parents' generation where, yeah, there were people who were transgender, but if it wasn't, they didn't have social media, and not everybody uses every type of social media like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, or Reddit. So if you're suddenly thrust into 2021 or it's 2015 in the game, and you haven't seen a lot of transgender people in Delos Crossing like Sam hasn't, you're not quite sure. You're relying on movies, you're relying on TV shows, you're relying on books and news stories. So I think there are a lot of people in the real world who just don't know. You don't know what you don't know if you're ignorant. And I think a lot of people, if they're willing to learn, please give them that chance. Yes, there are a lot of assholes out there who have evil intentions, but I think even more so, there are people who just don't know. I have questions. I don't identify as transgender, and I'm not sure what would be some appropriate questions to ask. I can kind of imagine because I know a little bit more than Sam, but I'm scared of maybe offending somebody. But I'm curious, like, what is that experience like? Because I don't know.
Right, and I think for Sam, yeah, actually, Sam it kind of represents the whole town because it feels like every person that all the people that you meet, they don't know how to react or they don't know how to approach the subject matter in a sense. You just like, oh, this used to be your sister because they only know them as two little girls. They don't know them as anything else. Allison, they know, yeah, because Allison grew up, nothing changed about her. Tyler, on the other hand, he was gone. He wasn't there. Situation happened, and Tyler was removed kind of from the town.
And what was I hate to interrupt, but what was Tyler's old name? Does anybody remember?
I don't know if we ever find out because in a lot of the diary entries, it's scratched out.
That was it, yeah. Because that's another thing that's a lot of people don't understand is it's called the dead name, where it's extremely offensive to go calling Tyler's old name, what he had when he was born, because part of it is that a lot of people don't understand. It's like, in terms of like, well, hey, you used to be this person, and it's like, no, that's not appropriate to say stuff like that. And giving people education why that is so offensive can kind of help in the long term and maybe help people understand, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. The transgender community can be very confusing, and the whole like their issues can be very confusing for people that don't know. For people that are cisgendered and all this stuff, that especially like generations that are born in the 50s and 60s, that things change so much for them, and for them to try to kind of keep up, I think education goes a long way, like you said, Celeste.
Yeah. So I actually, the thing so I have two things about Sam that I thought, my one thing is that he's very loving and very humble, and I think him and Mary Ann should have had something going on, but Mary Ann treated it as we're just friends. She was friend zoning him a lot, but it kind of felt like when he had hurt himself, no one else really cared besides Mary Ann. So it was kind of showing that, hey, you was considerate of me of getting better and everything, and you've been by my side. So it kind of felt like Sam was falling in love with Mary Ann. And then when she passed away, he couldn't let go, so he got into alcoholism, drinking a lot, and then when you get closer to the end of the game, which we'll get a little bit into later on, you kind of see him looking around to find out what his alcohol, to find some alcohol that he could drink, and he's picking up different bottles and drinking for him, and stuff, and it always kind of feel like, when are you going to let go? Because after that certain section, that's kind of the last time we see Sam. I mean, yeah, the last time we see Sam for it. My second thing about it is that I kind of wish that Sam I kind of wish that Sam really spoke about his old life with his wife and his kids, and seeing what is that the reason why Mary Ann's kids, Tyler and Allison, are more important than his own, in a sense. So because
interesting, Eddie.
Yeah, because there's like I said, there is a part when it gets to later on in the game, that same part where you kind of feel like I need some truth, and I need some out there connections to see why this stuff is happening, and why you were a big part of our lives, and maybe not a big part of your very own family's life. So.
and this is kind of sometimes the barrier that video games encounter, because we find out a lot about Sam when Allison kind of rummages through his things in the boathouse, whatever, so to speak. So like Sam is working on this boat while Allison is just rummaging through all his private letters and private information, and that's how we find out, more about Sam and his family situation. And it's always kind of interesting to think, like, if you were in a house and someone comes in and all of a sudden starts rummaging through your things, like, what would you say? But it's an interesting video game dynamic, where that's the best way to tell the story in a very quick, easy way, as opposed to a sit down session where Sam tells you everything about like his family and what he goes through.
Yes. So I'm going to save Michael, Tom, and Teresa for a little bit later in the discussion. I'm going to get into Eddie Brown now because this is going to lead into the game discussion that we're going to have. Eddie is the police chief of Delos Crossing and guardian of Allison Ronan. He and his mother, Carol, were good friends with Mary Ann. He is a member of the local Clean Gift community. He learned that Child Protective Service was investigating Mary Ann's care of her children at the request of Tessa Vici, and chose to inform Mary Ann. He helped to send Tyler to Fireweed rather than a juvenile detention center after the interrogation. The twins discovered Eddie was paying for Tyler's residence at Firewood and that he had lied to Allison about her getting into a theater camp. Eddie was told that preventing Allie from seeing Tyler would be better for her mental state, and did so. Fireweed was encouraging of the recommendations as well, and so he stopped Allison from visiting Tyler for a total of 7 years. If
there's a character that I feel bad for the most is Eddie, but Celeste can go.
Oh gosh. So I got a little confused in the game, and then when I was researching it, so 2005 is when the incident happens, and then 2015 is when Allison and Tyler are reunited. But so for 7 years they don't see each other, and then when they graduate from high school, which I guess they're 18 and they're legally adults at that time, they would have had the opportunity. We can do whatever we want. We can go see each other. But I'm trying to think of what happens for those 3 years. Is it for those 3 years? Is that when they actually just start writing letters to each other, or do they write letters to each other for the whole 10 years? I'm a little foggy on that. And there is a point where Eddie kind of fusses Tyler, saying, you had the opportunity 3 years ago to come and see Allison. So was it because Tyler was still dealing with his own stuff? Like that's when he started transitioning. So maybe he wasn't quite ready to muddy the waters, so to speak. I'm not sure. What do y'all think?
Story, I'm gonna let you go because I think I have an answer for what you're asking, Celeste. But Story, I'm gonna let you go first.
And I could be wrong in my assumptions on this, but I can only imagine, Tyler transitioning and then all of a sudden entering into the world almost as a new person compared to what others knew of him, for years and years. So I think there was I think it was alluded to in certain conversations where he was like, I didn't know how to approach people. I didn't know how to walk into a town I grew up in, everybody knowing me as one person, and now I'm a completely different person. I can only imagine the amount of anxiety Tyler must go through, especially maybe even interacting with his sister. Hey, I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm me, now. And I can only imagine the amount of anxiety that he must have went through in trying to kind of get the courage to walk out of Fireweed and say, this is who I am. This is me. And, I guess I have to live, he has to live with that.
So what was the impetus? Like, I don't remember if the game straight up says it, but what was the impetus for, okay, I'm leaving Fireweed? Is it because he was just ready? I'm ready to go pursue being a park ranger, or I've run out of my time? Because he's still an adult. He's an adult by the time he leaves. He's not a minor.
And I think that was the contingency of the situation that he was in. Obviously, Eddie kept him out of juvie and kept him into this fireweed protective services, or this residential camp. And I think, at that point he was pretty much done. He was a mentor for other kids in the community, and then, obviously he had to leave to basically pursue his dreams. So I think that was the contingency of his sentence, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And Eddie's paying for that. That can't be cheap. And he was, when we see him in 2015, he's the chief of police, which is probably a higher salary than what he was making 10 years ago when they were children, because cops don't get paid a whole lot of money. And so Tyler is not aware that Eddie is paying or had paid for his time at Fireweed. But that could not have been cheap.
No,
that's
working transition surgery is not cheap. It's not covered by insurance in most instances. It's getting better now, because I think that as they see more data, they start to see how beneficial it can be for for a lot of people, especially with their mental health. But this is why I feel the worst for Eddie, because he does what's right, and he knows it's for the better of everybody around him. It's the better for Allison. It's the better for Tyler. And if he's seen as the bad guy in the end, so be it. His intentions are very pure. And if he has to suffer the consequences of being seen as the bad guy in Tyler's eyes for the benefit of him and his sister's relationship, then so be it. And that's where it's like, he's a tough guy to break. He's a tough guy to get to know, to really understand. But near the end, especially in chapter 3, where he really starts to kind of show his true colors, then it's like, okay, I start to understand, and it starts to make sense.
Well, one more quick question, and it's not a huge part of the story, but why do you think he lied and told Allison, oh, you didn't get into that theater camp you and your friend Michael wanted to get into? Do you think it was because I can't afford it because I'm paying for your brother to stay at Fireweed? Do you think that was the reason?
Yes.
That's probably the closest thing I could think of.
Yeah. So I feel like Eddie was kind of the villain of this game. It's besides me. Yes, because the thing about it, it was just that when we get onto the boat and Allison and Tyler are coming into the town, Allison presents him with a ring, and it's trying to explain, hey, Eddie is trying to ask for your forgiveness. If you take the ring, it shows that you are willing to work with them. If you don't take the ring, it just says that you're not saying that you're not ready, but you still got some hesitance towards them. And for me, when I first started, I took the ring to show that I'm willing to work with anybody to make up for lost time and stuff. But my second playthrough, I actually told Allison, no, I don't want the ring, because this man who was your stepdad, just it's just to Tyler, he's a piece of crap and everything. And so when later on and they meet up, Tyler still has this attitude towards against Eddie and everything. So I kind of feel just like, not saying that I'm against cops and stuff like that. It was just something about his mannerisms that I was just like, there's something about you that I don't like or I don't trust.
And I'll agree with you to say that Eddie is the villain in this story, because evil always has good intentions, and that's how real life is almost. Someone always does a bad thing in life because of a well-intended thought or a well-intended process of just like, hey, I'm going to be the bad guy here because I want what's best for you two, and that was Eddie's angle. And if ultimately he's seen as the bad guy to Tyler, but Eddie needed to get done what needed to get done. And ultimately he lived with the consequences of that, as being seen as the villain in Tyler's eyes.
And he kind of feels I'm going to call Tyler Tessa for this episode. I feel like he called Tessa. He kind of felt like Tessa was a killer in his eyes. And it kind of felt like that he didn't want Allison to be around Tessa in this game because of that. And I don't know if he ever suspect Tessa was innocent or not, but there was something just be like, I don't want you to be influenced by your sister, so I'm going to keep you away. Even though I am fitting the bill to keep Tessa in the school, which and eventually she became Tyler. I don't want you getting involved. Now, the funny thing about it is that Allison still got involved with Tessa / Tyler because of the letters they were sending each other.
I got a little confused there because of the actual Tessa character.
Yeah, I was too. I was like, are you referring to Tessa Vecchi or?
Okay, because I see what you were doing because their names both start with a T, but you're using that as Tyler's dead name as an example.
Yes.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Yeah, because Teresa is the TH one. That's Tom's.
Oh, that's Tessa. Her name's Tessa.
Oh, her name's Tessa. What? No wonder I was good. Well, let's call her.
That's okay. There are a lot of T's in this game.
Let's call her
Tyler, Tessa. What the heck?
Let's call her Lucy.
Lucy.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. Lucy. So Lucy is Allison's sister for this episode. And so all that stuff said with Tessa, that was representing Lucy in this. So
well, and that is an interesting topic to bring up, because as far as Eddie's concerned, Tyler was the one that did it. Or yes. Lucy in this sense. Lucy was the one that did it. So he paints Tyler, I guess I'm going back. He paints Tyler as the murderer in this sense, because Allison and him are still keeping the secret of like Tyler basically taking the fall for this. Even though it's apparent who really did it. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was your guys' decision with Lucy when it came to the ring?
I didn't know who Eddie was because we had not met Eddie at this point. Allison is just talking about Eddie, and I kind of went with Tyler's instincts of this is someone I don't care for, and I think I threw the ring off the boat. And then I regretted it because it was not the right thing to do because the little sparkles split.
Yeah.
What about you, Stoy? What did you choose?
Well, see, and this is where I thought it was extremely unfair from the writer's perspective in the gameplay to introduce you with this as being one of the first choices. We know that Eddie raised Allison, that he was her stepfather, and all we know about Eddie is that apparently there's a little bit of strife. So this is one of your first decisions that you have to accept his forgiveness or not. Like I wasn't giving any pretext in terms of who Eddie was, what his role was. If I were given better understanding as the gameplay perspective, from my perspective of like who is Eddie and what does he do, then maybe I would have made the decision better. But I was like, okay, well, clearly Tyler's upset at this guy. I refuse to accept the ring. I didn't throw it off the boat like some people here. Jeez.
And my thing was, why didn't if Eddie knew where Tyler was at and was paying all of this, why did he not go up there and try to ask for forgiveness himself? There had to be something that Eddie knew that Tyler and Allison was coming into the house. I mean, coming into town, because I don't know if that town had a news travels fast kind of mentality to it, but if it does, Eddie should have been able to go meet them at the house and be ready to apologize. And I understand.
Imagine the anxiety that Eddie feels about that. Putting it in his shoes, that he knows the conversation would not go very well. He knows that Tyler will probably not listen to him and not even give him the time of day. So almost to a certain point, why would Eddie even bother? And he uses Allison as the medium because he knows Allison would probably reach Tyler better than Eddie would.
They've been in contact via emails and letters.
Yeah, and I know this is completely for build-up. build-up purposes for why the actions are committed in the game. So we're gonna fast forward a little bit because we got to get to the storefront that Allison and Tyler goes to, and this is where we meet Tom Vici. He's the owner of Vini Vidi Vici and husband of Tessa.
Don't say the next part. Don't go. Oh, I don't know. Like, how much do you want to reveal right now?
Well, you can say he's running for the mayor, right? You can say that, right?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just worried about the next part.
Okay.
Yeah, the third sentence in this. I don't know. I guess.
Yeah. So he is running.
This is your show.
He is running for mayor the Los Crossing. And when we get into the storefront, we meet Tom, and they're catching up, and Tyler and Allison is walking around the building, looking for stuff, but they also find Tessa there, and she is wife of Tom and owner of Tessa's Cafe Alaska. She was close friends with Mary Ann and often helped the Ronan family by loaning Mary Ann money and bringing them food. Tessa is extremely religious and tries to persuade Mary Ann to send Tyler to a conversion camp to prevent her desire to transition to male. And then there's the other part, but we're going to get to that a little bit later also. So what did we think of Tom and Tessa? Because at this point, for me, now Tessa seems as, she's just not a religious zealot or anything, but, she seems like the backstabber in a sense. And Tom the way that Tom is when you meet him, he's this gentle person, gentle, loving, and accepting person and everything. So the characteristics between those two is like the dynamic is weird, cause like he is the caring one, and she is kind of like she's kind of like the opposite, the uncaring, the thinking of thing. Instead of her being a religious person, being the caring one, and Tom not being religious, being the uncaring one. Like their roles in their way switch. Celeste, what did you think about Tom and Tessa?
Tom's very charming. I can see why he's running for mayor. He's very charismatic. He's very kind. He's very conversational. He is very accepting of Tyler. Like he makes an effort to use the correct language and treats Tyler like a person, which is all anybody could ask for. I was very intrigued by Tessa's Cafe. I wish we could have seen it because I love food and her dishes sounded delicious. So she's Filipino, and a lot of Filipinos are Catholic, and Tessa is Catholic.
Very, very Catholic.
Very, very Catholic.
Yes.
And her voice actress is Filipino as well. So good job, Don't Nod, on getting accurate representation here. But Tom, at first I was like, what's Tessa's problem? What's going on? And Tom, I liked him. What about you, Stoy?
Tessa, I didn't like at first because she was very much dominating in a way, because coming from a very strict Catholic upbringing, and I don't, when I say very Catholic, when I refer to the Filipinos in this sense, it's not in a mean way or anything like that, but they're very devout, and a lot of times that could be seen as very domineering to other people, in the sense where we see Tessa trying to help Mary Ann in her own way by saying, this is, and in some religious sects, transgender is an abomination. And Tessa, I think, sees that in this sense of like, you need to help her, in Tessa's eyes, you need to help your son or you need to help your daughter by basically taking her to this conversion camp and talking her out of it, so to speak. And we've heard stories of, families sending their kids to these conversion camps and obviously them not being successful because it's not the way that works. So obviously, as we see Tessa grow within the story, she starts to kind of understand a little bit more, especially when she kind of loses this relationship that she has with her best friend. I mean, Marianne is Tessa's best friend in this town, and she wants to help her in any way that she can. She is a very giving person. She is a very kind, warming person, even though she has a weird way of showing it. Mm-hmm. Tom is just a doof, man. He's
a doof.
Yeah, he's just this like overtly nice guy. He wants to help everybody, and he wants to be the mayor of the town for very good reasons, And he's just like, he's so like nice, warm, welcoming, and so it's weird seeing them two together, which him and Tessa together, which will be a topic I'll probably want to discuss later on in the episode once we get to it.
Oh, you bring up a good point, Stoy. I think someone alludes to the fact that if Tom wins the role of mayor, which is funny because I'm thinking of that TV show Tom Goes to the Mayor, whenever I put those together. Someone jokes that it will be Tessa doing the job of mayor.
Yeah.
Because that's just her personality. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. One of the characters that works in the story is Michael Bila, Alice's best friend since high school and co-worker at the general store. He is part of the Kingit community like Eddie Brown. He is an aspiring chef and wants to move to Genoa with Allison to be roommates. He enjoys fishing. Michael becomes attracted to Tyler and encourages him to consider moving to Genoa as well. Michael is concerned about Allison's traumatic past and encourages her to seek therapy.
Oh, Juneau, the capital
of
Juneau.
Yep.
Juneau.
I think I said Seattle earlier when I referred to Allison going to school, but I definitely meant Juneau.
That's okay.
And what did we think about Michael? I love Michael.
I want him to be my friend. Come on, Michael.
Yeah, I know. Michael's the type of guy that, it's like, yeah, can you be my friend too? I mean, he looks out for everybody around him. And obviously he becomes attracted to Tyler in a way because he sees, obviously he's that very helpful guy that he wants to help everybody. And I think he sees Tyler as maybe someone that like, hey, if we build our relationship together, maybe I can help you in a way. And that's how I see Michael. And obviously he's very good friends with Allison too. And I think his suggestions for Allison to seek therapy is a very good idea because I don't know if Allison sought a lot of therapy growing up, especially concerning the traumatic event that happened.
Michael's just so calm, and he just looks like someone who has mastered life, if that makes any sense. Have you ever been around somebody who just seems that he
hasn't mastered Nerf guns, that's for sure. Nerf gun fighting.
No. Well, when I say master life, I don't mean like, oh, you're successful, you're the CEO of this big company.
Yeah,
I mean someone who is living life.
He gets it.
And is happy and is content and is calm. He loves to go fishing. He loves to cook. Just that energy. Because I'm a very anxious person and I struggle some days. And I would love to have that kind of friend who's just like, it's going to be all right. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. I think it's when Michael and Tyler, when they're fishing together. Yep. That is the moment where the relationship grows, where it's just like, yeah, this is where they connect at, and you can make the decision of them being boyfriends or a couple or not, and I made them a couple definitely because I felt connected to Michael. I felt safe with him. And I think it's the voice acting, and once his personality is warm. Like, I agree with you, Celeste, that I would want him to be my friend. I took the boyfriend aspect for it.
There it is.
But there's just something about him warming where it's just like this openness that he has about himself. And that openness makes you just accept him for who he is. And I think it's something that Tyler, was kind of hesitant, but kind of realized that because of him so open and him being accepted and not caring what others think, that's the kind of encouragement that I want to have. That's the kind of thing that I'm attracted about, and it just felt right for that relationship. Story, did you make them connect together?
I didn't make them a couple because I don't think Tyler was in me personally. I don't think Tyler was in the right place to be in a relationship, and I know he's made mention of that a couple times, where he's kind of still trying to learn about himself, and he's made that conversation a couple times, I think, with Michael. But Michael is obviously attracted to Tyler in a way that he wants to be more than just friends. But I think which is kind of heartbreaking. But Michael was cool about it. He was like, all right, well, we'll still be friends. Like, it's not going to be awkward or anything like that, which is always the worst of it. But I think, I thought in the end, Tyler needed to grow more. And I think with Michael being good friends with Tyler, I think would have helped him a little bit better because, yeah, you got this kind of two dudes fishing kind of banter thing. And I think, I'm not a fisher. I don't fish because I think it's boring, but I could see the appeal of it, of just like, hey, let's chill out for a bit and, let's just hang out together. And that's it. And I think Tyler needs more friends in that sense. That's why I decided for him to just break Michael's heart.
What about you, Celeste?
I did make them a couple because I liked them together, but Stoy, you're making a lot of valid points because it's very jarring. Tyler's just leaving this, I don't want to say sheltered world of Fireweed Residential Services, but there's a whole big world out there that he has to experience. And he's also very young. I think they're 21, 20,
18, 19 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're young adults. And I think Michael means well and is genuinely attracted to Tyler, but now that you're bringing up those points, maybe go on a few dates, but I did make them a couple, but now that you're bringing up all these points, maybe go on a few dates, but maybe like a big committed relationship.
Well, and that's always been how I've approached relationships in the past, is that, obviously it's a service to both people. Like, Michael needs to serve Tyler, Tyler needs to serve Michael. And, as frustrating as it can sound sometimes, it's like, if you're not able to take care of yourself and to be comfortable with yourself, how can you take care of others? So I saw Tyler as in this flux of he's coming back into his hometown. He's trying to rekindle a relationship with his sister amongst other people in town. And it's I don't think he would be in a good place to really kind of serve Michael as a partner in this sense.
Well, it's mostly unexpected because I think Tyler, when their goal was just to sell the house. It wasn't Tyler wasn't looking for love, but because of the way that the game is written and how they interact, like you're both playing the little ball game, trying to hit each other, or you're running, you're doing those little mini games when you're downstairs, and then you sit on the couch, and it's that just some of the shots just look so heartwarming, and and it's kind of rom-comish in a sense, for a game that has this dark tone to it in a way with the murder mystery and everything, and it's just kind of felt like this is a side story that's a little bit light, and it's kind of one of the bright spots of the game.
Yeah, and you can't just also have a relationship by just sitting on the couch talking to a dude and let's go fishing. Hey, bro, we should be together. It's like, I just met you a couple days ago.
Yeah, it is pretty sudden. I guess I had the little Disney princess idea in mind of, it's a happy ending.
Oh yeah, and that's why, and that's kind of the I guess how I approach romance in just media in general, where it's that's not how that works. That's not how that works, because if you want to commit yourself to more, we're talking open the floodgates to this other person, there needs to be a kind of an understanding beforehand, where it's you have to really know the people to know is this a person I can really bare my soul to, or at least kind of learn to bare my soul to. And call me old fashioned or maybe call me a stick in the mud, but that's kind of how I feel about that, I guess.
Okay. Maybe I made that decision because I know it's not how it works in real life, and I was going to play the fantasy of the video game.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying that as a bad thing for other people to do that.
No, I appreciate your perspective because it's making me think.
Can I tell you, this is movie romance. Because in movies, stuff like this always happens. Yes. You know, they can hate each other. They kind of weary, and then somehow they fall in love and they feel like they've known each other for years. And it's just like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. And I guess for this medium of a video game, if you're going to use that movie formula, then I guess I'm gonna just do a little drops here and there and see what comes out. That's me. But I'm glad that you you didn't give them a couple relationship. That's good to hear.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, their friendship goes on very strong. And I was at least grateful for that Michael wasn't like all heartbroken and he's like, I never want to speak to you. I'm so embarrassed. Yes.
Yeah, it was very mature.
Yeah.
So we get to where
the house.
Yes, the house. They are searching the house, and they're kind of finding some things about the house, and it gets to a point where, Allison and Tyler disagree about some things, which causes like some trauma, for Allison, and this is kind of like the end of chapter 2 because I know we only got like half an hour before we leave. And so that kind of splits them up, like the house splits them up. But there's also more things that you kind of find out of the way. Like there's a secret with Tessa that they're trying to find out. They're trying to find out something becomes revealing to them that that they're trying to find out who is the father of both of them. And everything, because it seems like their father is alive. And last but not least, how did Mary Ann actually die? So
loaded questions.
So and we find something about that they didn't even know, which we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, but building up to that we're gonna get into. So let's tackle Tessa, because they meet Tessa in a graveyard, and I believe this is the graveyard that Mary Ann is buried at and stuff.
Yep.
Michael's uncle too.
Yes. And Michael's uncle, yes. So this point they confront Tessa, and I think is this the part where Tessa like reveals on what's going on or what went down?
She admits that she called Child Protective Services on them.
Yes, she was very concerned about Mary Ann's care for the children.
Yeah.
Okay. And does she felt regret about doing it?
I think so, because I think she maybe takes a little bit of the blame for what happened, because obviously Tessa has noticed a downfall in Mary Ann's mental health, and she thinks maybe the threat of calling Child Protective Services may have pushed her over the edge to do something, obviously in the end, that she may have regretted. So that's why Tessa still visits her grave every so often, because I think she feels that immense amount of guilt that I may have caused this in some indirect way.
And we alluded to earlier when we were talking about Mary Ann and Tyler and Allison find this book in Mary Ann's bedroom about how to raise or how to, I don't know if it's raise, it's something about with your transgender child. So Mary Ann was obviously wanting to make an effort to understand where Tyler was coming from and what he was experiencing. And
Tyler didn't know that, actually. That's the funny thing about it, is Tyler lived his whole life, 7 to 10 years in the fireweed, thinking that his mother did not like that he wanted to, transition, and she wanted to kill him. And throughout the entirety of the game, throughout the entirety of Tyler's, a good portion of Tyler's life, he thought his mother wanted to kill him. because of this. And once he starts to find out the truth, and like Celeste said, finding that pamphlet, that's when he's like, no way, this can't be right. Like she didn't like this. She wanted to kill me. Why is she reading this literature on how to raise a transgender child?
And it was Tessa who encouraged the conversion camp. And I think Tessa's a very strong person, but you can make decisions in the cemetery while talking to Tessa, and that will determine a lot of things in the game. So I chose to forgive her. I
did too.
Yeah. What about you, Eddie?
I forgave her for this.
We're all very forgiving people here.
Well, I will say it wasn't easy because every bone in my body wanted to not, because maybe her heart was in a good place that she wanted to help, and even though she had a weird way of showing it, she had every good intention of trying to help. And this is where having, I guess, a better understanding of people like Tessa wasn't having evil intentions. That wasn't where she was coming from. She wanted to help, even though, like I've said before, she had a weird way of showing it. She had her own way of showing it in the way she was brought up. Go ahead.
Which brings a conflicting part in this game for decisions, where it's kind of, if you think about it from outside looking in, how can people not forgive Eddie but forgive Tessa and vice versa? If you're going to be if you're going to make Tyler a unforgiving person, he needs to not forgive Eddie and Tessa throughout the game.
Yeah, and right. Yeah.
Because the thing about it is Tessa did worse than Eddie. Tessa Tessa kind of created the mental breakdown of their mom, which ended up causing her to lose her life. Where Eddie just sent Tyler off, instead of you not being able to transition in juvenile, I'm gonna send you to somewhere else. Which
was better for him in the long run.
Yes. So Eddie at least was thinking that more, and Tessa wasn't. If you think about it, if you're a person making choices.
Interesting. Yeah, that's because it's like Stoy was saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is where evil in this game takes many forms, where on one side you could see Eddie as a villain, on another side you could see Tessa as a villain. I see Tessa more as a villain, but a kind of a tragic villain, where she was raised a certain way. She is very stuck in her ways and her belief systems, and I think forgiving her gives her permission to change, gives her permission to understand. And I think in a lot of cases, people want to learn. They have this craving to learn new things, to understand, but they have to be almost like given permission. And that's where the forgiveness thing comes from. Given permission to just, I know I am the way I am, and it was the way I was raised, but I want to be able to learn. I want to be able to change and maybe understand. And Tessa needs people like Tyler and Allison to kind of say, it's okay, we forgive you, we can help you even.
Yes. And any thoughts, Celeste?
Tessa she's almost like Sam, just trying to understand the world.
Yes. Well,
actually, yeah.
Yeah. And we get to a point where Tyler and Allison is in the barn, and somehow there's a fire that happens, and we find out there's a shadowy figure that has caused this tragedy to happen. But Allison and Tyler escape, and they survive the burning, and yet the garage that they was in somehow is still in attack. But we're going to get to the part where they find out that their father of them are still alive. And Allison, Allison, she has a disagreement with Tyler that's big, and they separate. So, in the beginning of chapter 3, Allison is staying with Eddie, and Tyler is staying at the house, and um, they're both just distancing. They're both not talking to each other, and just have this kind of emotions, and it gets to a point where Allison kind of wants some answers, so she goes in to go meet Sam at his workplace / home. And she goes in, and she's kind of talking to Sam, and Sam ends up hurting his hand, and she tells her to go get some bandages that's in the cabinet. And Allison goes get it and hands it over to Sam, but doesn't let it go. She asks Sam, "Are you my father?" And at that point in time, I was waiting for him to say yes. What about you guys?
I was pretty dang sure that he was their father.
I was not.
It was too obvious.
No, I knew he wasn't, because I guess his intentions and his it was like that would have been the ideal situation. I would have loved for him to be, but the way he was written into the story and the way his character was, it's like I knew he wasn't. I knew obviously that he loved Marianne very much, and he wanted to be something to her, and even something to Allison and Tyler, but I knew ultimately he wasn't the father. I knew. So.
Well, what kind of gave me the vibe that he wasn't the father is that it didn't feel like there was a promise made from Mary Ann to say, hey, let's make a promise not to tell the kids that you are the dad, because of your marriage and it's intact and you have kids. And Mary Ann was just like, if this that did happen, this is something that was in my mind. And, Mary Ann probably was just like, I don't want to break it up or anything. But the marriage was already destroyed because it kind of felt like he was hanging around too much with Mary Ann. And that was the reason for the divorce. And I mentioned this thing earlier because when Sam goes upstairs and Allison follows, there's a point where on the TV there is a letter with a check on it, and it's from his son, from Sam's son. And Sam's son says, "Hey, I talked to Ma, and I heard that you was in a financial trouble. I know it's not a lot, but please do call me." He sends him a check for $150. And then maybe we due to even though he is a great fixer of boats and stuff, we just finding out that he's having financial trouble, and it might be due to the alcoholism.
Well, that, and he doesn't. I think he was even in the story about how he was not charging what he should be charging. He was more so helping people, and maybe I'll pay me later, or charging him less than what he should be. Yeah.
Yes.
That's not good when you can't pay your bills, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, ultimately, in the end, you want to help people, but you also got to make a living.
But it don't even like this time has bills, because I'm still trying to figure out how did she pay for a house.
Oh, God, man.
I know who paid for the house. I know exactly who paid for the house. We'll get to that when we get to that. But I like I said, I felt bad for Sam, because I think ultimately Mary Ann was not the cause of the divorce. I think whatever Sam was going through that led him to maybe have feelings for Mary Ann was not Mary Ann's fault. And that's where I kind of think about how divorces happen, where like if a divorce doesn't happen because of the person that the other person cheated with, there was something that drew Sam away from the marriage. And obviously the game didn't touch on that because that's a whole nother bag of worms. But Sam is also the epitome of the nice guy finishing last kind of thing, where, he's such a good guy and he wants to be with Mary Ann ultimately in the end after the divorce. But Mary Ann was just like, hey, I'm just going to put you right here in the friend zone. And that's where you're going to stay. And Sam's like, man.
Well, he when he hurt his leg, he felt worthless, and it was because of Mary Ann getting him up to go do something. And I was because at that point when I read that, I was just like, why the wife not doing nothing?
Were
And
they still together?
That was the question I was having. I don't know if they were together
I don't recall.
at that time.
I don't recall.
I'm not sure of the timeline of their divorce.
Yeah.
So Sam is showing Addison some pictures, and it's one particular picture where there is a attic and or a loft there, and Addison didn't know anything about it, and they kind of find out, well, uh, there is a decision where Addison could tell Sam, forget Mary Ann or this other option. I chose the other option. I told her not to forget. I didn't want him forgetting Mary Ann because I feel like that was the cause of the alcoholism. But what did you guys choose? And this is before he goes into his monologue and falls asleep.
I think I wanted him to forget Mary Ann, I believe.
Same.
Okay.
I think ultimately, obviously he probably felt, there's an immense amount of guilt where Tessa felt guilty that she may have pushed Mary Ann over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sam kind of maybe feels a little bit guilty that he wasn't there enough to help her. And that may have spiraled him out of control into, being more of an alcoholic after her death. But, Sam obviously helped maintain the house, helped fix the appliances, built the shed, built the attic area and stuff. He was there for her at every whim. And anytime, she needed help. Obviously, she knew where to go to. She went to Sam for a lot of it. And he just wanted to help. And ultimately, in the end, with Mary Ann being gone, it's like, you got to move on, man.
Yes. Okay. So we get to the final portion of the game. They go up in the attic. They solve some puzzles. They find out this letter from the mom, and then
Mary Ann's mom, right?
Yeah, Mary Ann's mom.
Yeah. Well, there's a big reveal there too. There's a big reveal. I know we alluded to it, but
go ahead, Celeste. Are we talking about the reveal of the father or a different reveal?
The baby. They have a half-brother who passed away in infancy. I'm assuming from sudden infant death syndrome is what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think she alluded that I think it was within a year.
Yeah, and it was during he was sleeping, and then they were both sleeping when she woke up. He had passed away, the little baby. Mm-hmm. His name is Leo, and Leo is buried underneath a tree in their backyard.
Yep.
Which makes me wonder, did other people in the town kind of notice, hey, Mary Ann doesn't have her little baby anymore? I don't know. It made me think, okay, what are the legal procedures? Like, did you have to get some kind of special permission to bury your child on your property? Did you tell authorities? Because I'm assuming Leo had a social security number, a birth certificate. Maybe I'm just getting too technical.
Dial it back a bit. That's a little bit too real.
Yes.
I imagine I don't know the intricacies of like how to bury your own kin, I guess. But in that sense for her, but I imagine maybe people just didn't want to talk about it. I mean, can you imagine like just talking about it amongst people like, oh yeah, she had a baby and she died suddenly. That's not, I don't think that's a comfortable conversation to have, even with like the other siblings, Allison and Tyler, like, hey, your mom had another son before you guys and he died. Like, I wouldn't be talking about that openly.
Yes. So there after that there is a confrontation. So you guys ready? Now at this point in time, if you do not want spoilers, please stop the podcast and go play Tell Me Why. There's more to the story, more to the game that we didn't talk about in reveal. So you can find out more things that lead up to this point. If you have played it, continue listening. If you have not played it but still want to know what's going on, be forewarned. this is the ending of the game, getting closer to the end of the game. So as many times as you play it, this will always happen. So you guys ready?
My seatbelts are on. I'm ready.
Okay. So I was talking about Tom Vecchi a little bit earlier. And so I'm going to finish this part of the description about him. He began an affair with Mary Ann Ronan and is the father of Allison and Tyler.
You are the father.
That was a Maury episode.
Yeah.
He had offered Mary Ann money to have an abortion. Tom didn't interact with the children much during their childhood. A few days before Mary Ann's death, Tom had visited with her outside, where the two argued about money and Mary Ann's mental state. Tom shows up on the night the twins feel threatened by Mary Ann. He claims Mary Ann was not going to hurt Tyler.
That's where, like I said, Tom was noticing that's where I think the angel investor, so to speak, that Mary Ann had, Tom did not want this to come out. Yes. Obviously, he wanted to pay for the abortion. Mary Ann did not want to. Mary Ann wanted to raise children. So she obviously had the twins, and Tom was kind of paying to keep it quiet. Mary Ann could have very well told everybody in town, hey, Tom's the father of my babies, and Tom would have had to have answered for it. But I think Tom was paying hush money to basically keep her together. And I think Tessa had known about it, maybe like a little bit, like she kind of had assumptions of it. So that's where maybe I think like she was a little bit more helpful to Mary Ann than she probably could have been. But that's who I think is basically taking care of her all throughout their lives.
That's a strong woman, because if I found out my husband had an affair and had children as a result of that affair,
well, that's where that's why I think like Tessa maybe kind of had feelings, but she didn't have the proof.
Yeah. So I was a little disappointed that Tom's the father. I thought it was I guess because I don't know, maybe anticlimactic is not the right word.
Well, this is one of the things. None of the kids look like Tom. There looks like no DNA from him. Like not wearing the glasses, not the hair or anything. Everything looks like the characters, the kids look just like the mom, or designed to look like the mom. There's no indication.
Can you imagine how big of a spoiler bust that would be if all of a sudden you see Tom and it's like, oh, he looks like my characters. He must be my father. So that's I agree with you in the sense that in a lot of cases, there's always the running joke I've always had with my friends, like, wow, your son does not look anything like you, man. Like, it's kind of a funny joke, but yeah, it's obviously with good intentions. It's funny, but yeah, I think that was designed purposely for the kids to not look like Tom, to save it for the end.
Okay, I have a lot of things to say.
Oh boy.
Not a lot. Okay, so in my research for this game, so there are not a lot of characters. There are some minor characters we have not touched on. One of them is this guy named Alexander you meet at the beginning of the game. And he and Tom share the same voice actor. So there were a lot of fans who were speculating that it was that random Alexander guy who would be the father. But another thing, you remember, okay, there's a part at the end of either chapter 1 or chapter 2 after Tyler and Allison talk with Eddie at the police station for the first time. And as you're leaving, the Mad Goblin is seen in the background in the police station, like this haunting figure, which, by the way, Tom represents. The Mad Goblin represents Tom in the Book of Goblins. So what did y'all think about that? Because I was like, whoa, what's this Mad Goblin doing in the police station? Was it, I don't know, like, what do you think the symbolism of that was? Was it the truth will be revealed? Was Tom hanging out at the police station, but they couldn't show Tom? Was he, I don't know.
I really don't know. I really don't have an answer for that.
Well, this is where, like I said, the story that Mary wrote, obviously the Mad Goblin represented Tom, because Tom came through many times in the kids' lives, but I think, Mary Ann did, her best to hide Tom from the kids, because I don't think she wanted Allison and Tyler to know who their father was. So she created him as a villain. so to speak. And this is why, like in a lot of these flashback memories that they had of, Marianne at the pier talking to the shadowy figure, they were never able to piece together who it was and who basically was the cause of Marianne's stress in her life. If anything, I think Tom was the one that really pushed her over the edge in terms of being more threatening to Mary, and Mary grabbed the shotgun to basically handle her business. She threatened Tom on numerous occasions, get off my property, otherwise I will take matters into my own hands. And that's what explains the final scene where Marianne had the shotgun, and coincidentally, shortly after, Tyler told his mom of his intentions of wanting to transition, I guess.
So did you guys pick Tom's version of what happened that night, or Allison's version, where Tom said Marianne said she would never hurt you, Tyler, and then Allison, or is it Tyler or Allison who says, I'm going to kill, I think it's Tyler. Tyler's version is, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, Tyler's version is that is Marianne is telling Lucy that he's going to kill her. Because when you select it, you hear Marianne's voice going, I'm going to kill you, like it's anger. And then when you're on the decision of Tom's, you hear this gentle voice be like, I'm not going to hurt you, and all of this and stuff with Marianne's voice. So I chose Tom's version for it. Because I kind of felt like that was the right one, that she wasn't going to try to kill him or anything. And so that they actually stabbed them. Allison literally stabbed the mother to death to protect her brother. Still, but I think that she wasn't going to hurt Tyler or Lucy at that time, I should say.
What about you, Stoy?
This is where I'm trying to remember, because when Tyler obviously is scared by the fact that Mary turns around and she's holding a shotgun at her son. That can be traumatic for someone to experience and see, because all of a sudden, you're afraid to approach your mom after what you told her. And then all of a sudden you see her with a shotgun, and she's obviously agitated and angry. Tyler already created this traumatic event in his head to say, oh my God, she wants to kill me now. So she runs away to the pier, and stupidly, and this is where I kind of have problems with the way they wrote the ending. Stupidly, she runs after her own son with a loaded shotgun. And I'm like, why did they write it that way? The ending, the game obviously could have played out much differently, with her just maybe leaving the shotgun and going to chase her son to say, I'm not going to hurt you. But with Tyler being scared, a scared child, he sees his mom chasing after him to a pier where he has nowhere to go, holding a shotgun. Of course, naturally, he's going to remember the event as him saying, she wants to kill me. So this is where I'm trying to remember whose version was correct, because I think obviously Allison seeing, her mom lording over Tyler with a gun, she's obviously going to be concerned and want to obviously help her brother. So this is where I think maybe Tyler understood, like, obviously she doesn't want to hurt him.
Yeah, I think she's saying, when she says, I'm going to kill you, we learned that it's possible she was talking to Tom, because he was on the property that night. But I did go with Allison's version because, quote unquote, correct. I was like, okay, this is going to make the twins bond stronger because Tom's a piece of crap to them.
Yeah. So in the end, deeper than known, what choices you make. I know Allison tells Tyler that she doesn't want to use the bond technique anymore, and so that's, well, of course, is at the end of the game. You don't use it anymore. You get some ending. So, Celeste, what ending did you get?
I got the ending where Allison decides to keep the house for herself, and she completely remodels it. And I had chosen the option to be in a relationship with Michael, for Tyler to be in a relationship with Michael. So they go off to Juneau and participate in a lot of LGBTQIA plus events. And I think Tyler's still pursuing the park ranger stuff. I don't remember if that changes if he moves to Juneau, but I kept thinking, gosh, how can Allison, who seems to be really the most troubled by everything, how can she bear to live in this house even though it's remodeled? Like that would be difficult for me, I imagine. I don't know. What about you, Stoy?
I chose, obviously I didn't stay with Michael, so or I didn't choose to be with Michael or anything like that, but I obviously chose the ending where she moves on, where they sell the house and she moves on with her life, because I think, you know, whether that be considered the true ending or not, I guess is up to interpretation. But I wanted her to basically, obviously, in the end, she was seeking therapy, much to Michael's, because her and Michael moved to Juneau, and obviously he goes for culinary school, and she decides to go for, I forget what she was going for. I think journalism or something like that. I forget what she wanted to go to school for.
Her certificate was the one that the credit card information was stolen from. That was accounting.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm. But I mean, she ended up obviously going to school, and then she made allusions. She alluded to her going to therapy to basically unpack a lot of the childhood trauma that she experienced, that she's been holding on for so long. And obviously, Tyler's going for ranger school, so to speak. So. But yeah, in his scene, obviously he's going through the house one last time before they, you know, kind of pack up everything. And she, you know, he's talking on the phone with her, and, you know, she's like, "Is everything done? Is everything cleaned out?" And he's like, "Yep, pretty much everything's good to go." And they basically move on with their lives. So.
Yeah, I chose the relationship with Tyler, and I think I chose Tom's version of the story. With it, and I think I got the same ending as you, Celeste. That they keep the house, and he goes off with Juno. With Michael, and everything. Because I kind of felt like, what also ends up happening is that Tessa ends up leaving Tom, and Tom didn't win the mayor race.
Yeah. That's the ending I had. Did Tessa stay with Tom in your version, Stoy?
Nope.
Because that is a possible ending.
Yeah, no, she definitely once it got out that Tom obviously I think once Allison and Tyler found out who their real father was, obviously that was the downfall. Tom lost the election and Tessa left him. So
she goes on a mission trip.
Yep.
Yes. Yes. And so that is Tell Me Why. We are coming to the conclusion of Talk and Walk. So you guys, starting with you, Story. Should people play Talk to should people play Talk to Walk? Should people play Tell Me Why?
I think so, because I think it is a good you know, I had my issues with a lot of the narrative choices in the game in terms of the ending was very anticlimactic for me, where it was like, oh, that was it. Like I maybe I expected a little bit too much from the ending to be a little bit more impactful than what it really was. But ultimately, in the end, the murder was just a case of, oh, whoops, a mistake. Like, that's it. You know, I expected maybe something a little bit more, and maybe that was partially my fault going into it. I think what made the game more impactful for me were the characters. And Don't Nod writes great characters. And whether or not you like the story direction and the way it goes is one thing, but I think when you really delve into the characters, I think you really gain more from the game than, you know, the ending, which I think was, like I said, just kind of lazy.
One question for you all. Do you think Tom should went to jail for arson?
Yeah, probably. For setting that barn on fire?
Yeah, because they were inside the barn, so he was trying to kill them, and it looked like they didn't tell him nothing.
I don't think that they weren't in the barn. He was trying to burn it because they were going to find the letter with the abortion reveal, like that he had wanted their mom to abort them.
Mm-hmm.
They see it, and then the shadowy figure runs past Tyler and knocks him out or something, knocks him down. But
Okay.
Yeah, arson. That would have been nice. Running for mayor and charged with arson.
Yeah, right. No kidding.
Yeah.
Celeste, should people play Tell Me Why?
Absolutely. And I think what I really like about it is even though it has all these feats with LGBTQIA plus themes, I think it treats them perfectly as these are just people. That's not even the point, the main focus of the story, if that makes any sense. Tyler, it's talked, the different characters who struggle with the fact that Tyler is now a man and they're not used to that. There are those conversations, but it's really about the mystery. It's about growing up and finding out the truth about the past, which I would assume everybody just wants to be treated like a person, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, be celebrated and revere how far we've come. But Tyler seems like, I just want to be treated like a person. I want to be treated like a human being. I don't want my gender identity to be the only thing people notice about me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that's when I alluded to the choice that I made, where it was like Tyler just saying, I just want to be me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's all Tyler wanted. It's like, I just want you to treat me as me. Doesn't matter if you knew me as one person and now I'm a different person. Just treat me as a person. That's it. Do not pander to me. Do not try to make exceptions for me. Do not try to, sugarcoat around me or tiptoe around me. Just treat me like a normal person. And I think the ultimate mystery in this game was just trying to live through childhood trauma.
Absolutely. And I think people need to play this game for the graphics. Just that scenery when you're on the boat and you can see the mountains and the trees. And Delos Crossing just felt so cozy. What about you, Eddie? Do you think you should play Tell Me Why?
Yes, I believe people should play Tell Me Why. Definitely for the narrative. Definitely to understand why it's important to have a game like this, for not just for Pride Month, but in video games in general, and why LGBTQ characters are important to video games. It's not just it shouldn't be just a one-time thing. This should be not in every game, but there should be a team that create games with characters and themes of this nature, so that people can be educated, people can learn, and people who have moral choices, and they could test them out to see what happens if I go against my moral choice and stuff. And I feel like Tell Me Why offers a little bit of that. Now there is some hokiness here and there, but in the end, you really feel for the characters. You can really come away from the story a little bit satisfied. You want to go back in to see other stuff. Like I said, I still feel for Sam. Like, there's just something about him that I love, but it's also a tragic kind of love because of his alcoholism, and I think if it is really funny to see how he was happy in pictures and then see how he is in real life as a character that you interact with. And Stoy, you probably could attest to that there's probably been people who deals with alcoholism that if you've seen their pictures before they had this kind of problem, and I don't know any other way to consider it as, that you could see that it looks like they were happy and they were joyous, or they feel like their life was really going somewhere, and then you see them where this situation that they are dealing with has kind of has robbed them of that joy.
Well, and that's why the story surrounding Tell Me Why deals with just trauma and how people get over it. And I feel for Allison, I think more so than any character, because she suppressed it. She suppressed that trauma and she kind of buried it in an effort to just live her life and I just want to be a normal kid. I want to be a normal teenager. And she suppressed a lot of these memories. So that's why there's the dynamic between them two, her and Tyler, that their memories are matching up about things, because she's more so suppressing it. And that's why I very much encourage her to kind of go to therapy so she could start unpacking these things, which I don't think she ever had the chance to do. And Sam had the trauma of, losing a woman that he cared about, and he was not given permission to live his life. And that's why he turned to alcoholism, because that, that kind of feeling that alcohol gives you of just forgetting things that's why there's the appeal of that. And it is kind of sad to see people spiral downward in that.
Yeah. Before we go and we do our plugs, I do recommend people to play a game called Papo and Yo, or go look at it. It deals with the creator of that game kind of telling his vision of him dealing with an alcoholic dad. And the abuse and stuff that he got, and why that game was created. Like, even if you want to play it or read about it, it's a really good game. And it's not a talk the walk kind of game, but I think I love when creators and developers tackle important issues like that. Like, I feel like alcoholism is an important issue, definitely for people who, and this is not a race thing or anything, but people who have dealt with that, it's hard to recover from it, because it's just like you see your friends and other people around that's drinking, and you don't want to be in that environment because of the stuff that you've been through. And sometimes alcoholism, just like Mary Ann, how the way that she was treated, she kind of treated her kids that way, in a sense, thinking that they could protect her. Like, alcoholism, for some people, it just transfers. It goes from the dad or the mom or whatever to their kids, and the cycle continues. So if you are interested of looking it up or playing it, it is on PS3 though, so it is a whole game, but it might be on PC also. It's called Papa and Yo. And I learned about the game reading from the developer himself on why he created it, and I was just like, wow. But everybody, that has been Talk the Walk. Stoy, go ahead and plug. Where can we find you?
Well, I am part of the EXP podcast. We're a video game podcast where obviously we talk about video games. That's kind of our running shtick. We do record episodes pretty weekly. We release new episodes Mondays and Thursdays, and we talk about everything video game news, previews, games we've been playing, and then various video game topics around. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EXPcast. And you can also check us out on the Boss Rush Games Discord. We have a room in there, and you can interact with us there. On a side note, you mentioned Vita. I actually just downloaded a game last week called Actual Sunlight. It's a game it's a very, very heavy game that deals with suicide. And it's kind of like a walking simulator made in like just kind of basic Super Nintendo style graphics, but very, very tough game to play. Very short game, but it's on the Vita too as well. It made me dust off my Vita to play it. So.
Oh.
All right. And everybody also check out bossrushgames.com. Stoy has some writings up there, some articles. So do check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I do that as well.
Yeah.
Celeste, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Fairy Crypt. I am on Talk the Walk with Eddie and our guest. Usually Billy is on as well. I am also one of the hosts of the 1v1 podcast, where we interview creators of all types. I had the pleasure of interviewing Stoy, Pat, and Josh a few months ago, and I had the pleasure of interviewing Eddie for his second 1v1, a refresher, an updated one. And I'm also with another Zelda podcast, so if you like Zelda, I think you might like us. And this episode will be coming out in time, so I'm going to say it now. Another Zelda podcast will be at the Video Game Summit in Villa Park, right outside of Chicago, on July 17th. And I'm really excited to meet Stoy and Eddie in person there. So if you happen to be in the area on July 17th, come say hi.
Yes, and everybody also catch Celeste on her Twitch channel, as she has given us makeup tips and hang out.
Oh, thanks. I do that occasionally.
So yes, check it out. And you guys can find me on Twitter at that Retro Code. You can check me out as I host Nintendo Pod Block. I also have my own podcast, Optional Opinion, where you can catch on SoundCloud and other podcast apps. We did a Pride panel here on Boss Rich Games, so you guys can check that out on our YouTube page or Spotify or wherever you listen to our podcast at, and at World 101 Podcast at podbean.com. With that, everybody, hopefully you guys will go out and try Tell Me Why. It's a really fun game, really a really great topic, I should say, to discuss with friends after finishing it. With that,
it's free this month, if anything. I mean,
yes.
Come
the barrier
on.
for entry is literally zero.
You can afford free, I promise.
Yes. Yeah.
With that, everybody, have a great week, have a great weekend, and we will see you next time for Talk the Walk, when we kind of going to be talking about Creed. So come join us there. With that, everybody, we will see you next time on Talk the Walk. Bye, everybody.
Take care.